The castle looms before us. Not the shining palace that fairy tales would make us imagine, but a fortress, cold stone, narrow windows, and winds that creep through the cracks, no matter how many tapestries hang on the wall. Inside, torches flicker and smoke drifts upward, carrying the scent of damp wood. In one of the highest chambers lives our princess. Her bed is carved from oak, grand to look at, but stiff and uncomfortable. Even here, in her most private space, she is not alone. At the foot of her bed, her ladies-in-waiting curl up on pallets, their presence both company and a reminder that she has no true privacy. If she turns in her sleep, someone will hear. If she whispers in fear, someone will know. The stone beneath her feet is always cold. In winter, frost clings to the windows, and her breath clouds the air when she wakes. Fleas crawl in the straw mattresses, bedbugs hide in the folds of the bedding, and the smell of the chamber pot nearby lingers, no matter how many herbs are scattered across the floor. This is her daily life, not soft, not sweet, but heavy and unchanging. The princess's day is carved into strict hours. The bells of the chapel mark her morning prayers, and she bows her head not because she chooses to, but because it is expected. After prayer comes lessons, needlework, music, or the reading of scripture under the sharp eyes of her tutor. A mistake, even a small one, may bring the sting of a paddle against her hand. Meals are not moments of freedom either. She eats as her father commands, seated behind the men of the court. The food is rich, roasted meats, heavy breads, cheeses, but she cannot truly enjoy them. Every gesture, every bite is watched. Even the way she lifts her spoon might be judged. In the afternoon, there may be more lessons, learning to manage household accounts, practicing the languages of distant kingdoms, or reciting prayers until her voice grows hoarse. There is no time to slip away and laugh, no field to run across, no secret garden to hide in. Her life is a chain of duties, each link made of expectation. Though her world is cold and rigid, her clothing is warm, almost suffocatingly so. Heavy gowns layered with velvet and fur weigh upon her shoulders, stitched not for comfort, but to proclaim wealth. Her hair, long and golden, must never be shown in public. It is bound tight and hidden beneath a wimple, for in the eyes of the church, a woman's uncovered hair is a temptation, a sin waiting to be born. To be pale is to be noble. To be delicate is to be respected. So she avoids the sun. She keeps her hands soft, and she trains herself to move with the fragile grace of a porcelain doll. But inside, she longs to stretch, to run, to laugh without worrying about the curve of her smile. And what of her place in the family? Ah, here lies the greatest weight of all. To her father, the king, she is not a child, but a promise of alliance, of peace, of land, of power. Her marriage has nothing to do with her heart, and everything to do with strategy. The moment she was born, her future was already written like ink upon parchment. If she displeases him, if she argues, cries, or begs for mercy, he has ways of reminding her of her place. Some princesses are sent away to convents, their lives sealed in silence. Others are married off quickly, their childhood cut short. She loves her mother, yes, but even the queen cannot save her. Duty comes before affection. In gatherings, the princess and her sisters stand behind the men. They smile softly, say little, and know that their voices are whispers in a hall of shouts. Her education is not one of freedom, but of survival. She learns to sew, for garments must be mended. She learns to mix herbs, for a wife must heal her household. She learns numbers, for servants will cheat the unskilled. And she learns languages, Latin for the church, French or German for the possibility of marriage across borders. But behind these lessons lies a harsh truth. Mistakes bring punishment. A miscounted sum, a crooked stitch, a hesitation in reciting prayers. Each can be met with a sharp word, or worse, the paddle upon her hand. She learns quickly, not because she enjoys it, but because she fears it. Yet the greatest fear waiting for her is not in the classroom, nor in her father's anger, but in the chamber where new life is born. For a medieval princess, her body is not her own. It is the vessel through which heirs must come. Sons to secure the dynasty, daughters to repeat the cycle. But childbirth is dangerous. There are no clean instruments, no pain relief, no understanding of infection. Too many young women die before their 30th birthday. Their lives ended not by war, but by the very duty of motherhood. And yet, the expectation remains. She must bear child after child, as many as her body can endure. In such a life, you may wonder, did she have friends? The truth is bitter. Her ladies-in-waiting may smile, but they are also rivals, watching for mistakes to use as weapons. When she is married away to a foreign court, she becomes a stranger, her accent mocked, her every action doubted. Loneliness becomes her constant companion. At night, when candles burn low, she cannot whisper her fears even to herself. She is surrounded by people, yet more isolated than anyone. Her choices are none. From birth, her path is drawn, each step fixed. Unlike the young squires who may choose knighthood, she cannot decide. She cannot dream freely. She cannot hope for love. Religion surrounds her life like the very air she breathes. She prays in the morning, at noon, at night. Every mistake is labeled sin, every doubt a whisper of hellfire. The church teaches her that obedience is holiness, and fear of damnation shapes every decision. Society, too, holds its hierarchy firm. Royals at the top, peasants at the bottom, and no one allowed to step outside their place. Words, not swords, become the true weapons of the court. A misplaced phrase can wound more deeply than steel, and alliances shift with every whispered rumor. Dear friend, as for love, love is not for princesses. Marriages are contracts. A glance, a smile, even the sound of her husband's voice before the wedding may be denied her. She goes to the altar, a stranger, her hand given in the name of peace, her heart left behind in silence. Sometimes, when the heavy doors of the castle opened to the courtyard, the princess would pause. She would glance at the patches of green where herbs grew for medicine, or roses were planted to soften the coldness of the stone walls. For a moment, the sight of flowers filled her with longing. Yet even here, the garden was not hers. If she reached to touch a bloom, a governess might remind her, "Do not bend too low. Your Highness, remember your posture." If she lingered too long, someone would notice and whisper about her idle behavior. The earth beneath her slippers, the sky above her veil, they belonged to God, to the king, to the kingdom, but not to her. To outsiders, she looked like a girl blessed with riches, her gowns heavy with embroidery, her meals richer than a peasant could dream. But deep inside, she carried a sorrow. She had never truly been a child. While peasant children laughed in muddy lanes, chasing dogs and tumbling in straw, she was being taught to sit straight for hours, to keep her eyes down, to sew until her fingers bled. While village girls sang songs in the fields, she memorized Latin prayers under threat of punishment. Her dolls were not toys, but symbols of future duties. A wooden cradle for a child she would one day bear. Miniature cooking pots to remind her she would command kitchens. Play was never play, it was preparation. And so, though her face was youthful, her soul had already been aged by duty. When she reached her early teens, the whispers began. Messengers arrived at the castle, carrying letters sealed with the wax of foreign lords. At the high table, her father discussed alliances, the value of land, the strength of armies. She would hear her own name mentioned, spoken as though it were not hers, but a coin to be traded. The princess might serve well in Burgundy. The Count of Aragon seeks an alliance, perhaps France, if their prince comes of age. Never once did anyone ask her what she wanted. Never once did anyone ask what her heart dreamed of. Marriage was not a hope, but a sentence, a contract inked before she had even seen the face of her future husband. At the center of her fear stood her father. The king's word was law, and his temper was sharp. If she displeased him, even in small ways, she might find herself banished to a convent. A fate whispered about like a punishment worse than death. The convent meant silence. Walls higher than any castle, prayers from dawn until night, and the life without choice forever sealed. For some princesses, the convent had been their only escape from the cruelty of court. But for her, it was a threat, a shadow always waiting. So she bowed her head, she smiled when expected, and she whispered yes, father when every part of her wanted to scream. The castle was not just walls and chambers. It was a living thing. Kitchens with dozens of servants, cellars filled with barrels of wine, stables echoing with the stamping of horses. One day, it would be her duty to manage such a household in her husband's court. And so she was trained. She learned to keep accounts, to calculate how much bread should be baked, how much salt should be stored for the winter. She learned to listen carefully, for servants would cheat if they thought her weak. She learned to read inventories, to measure cloth, to balance the spending of a household. In many ways, this training gave her power, not the power of a king, but the quiet, unseen power of control. Yet it was not freedom. It was responsibility given without choice. At feasts, she learned another lesson: how to wear a mask. The hall would be filled with lords and knights, their laughter rising over the crackle of fires, their goblets spilling wine upon the tables. Music would play, banners would hang, and the air would be heavy with the smell of roasted meat. And there she would sit, her smile calm, her voice soft, her eyes lowered. She must look delicate, serene, unshaken by noise or insult, even when drunken lords whispered about her, even when they boasted of her future as though she were already theirs. She remained still, to falter, to weep, to show anger. Any of these would be remembered and repeated. In court, words were sharper than swords, and the wrong word could wound a lifetime. So she wore the mask of grace, even when her heart ached inside. You might imagine that surrounded by people, she would never be alone. But the truth was the opposite. Her ladies-in-waiting smiled and curtsied, but their eyes were sharp, watching for weakness. Some whispered behind her back, jealous of her gowns, her name, her place. Others sought to please her, only to climb higher themselves. When she spoke, she measured every word, for even her own companions might twist them into weapons. When she laughed, it was gentle and restrained, for too much joy would be called unseemly. And so, even in the busiest halls, she felt alone. Loneliness was not the absence of people, it was the absence of trust. The court was no place of swords and shields, but of whispers and alliances. Here, battles were fought not with steel, but with smiles and secrets. A misplaced word could ruin a reputation. A poorly timed glance could spark a rumor. The princess learned that silence was safer than honesty, that nodding politely could save her from scorn. Her father's court was filled with watchful eyes. And in this world, survival depended not on bravery, but on caution. Dear listener, at night, as the chapel bells rang, she folded her hands and prayed. She prayed for forgiveness for sins she could not name. She prayed for safety, for her soul, for a future she could not imagine. The church taught her that to disobey her father was sin, that to dream of freedom was sin, that to wish for love was sin. She feared hell as much as she feared her father's wrath, and yet, in the quiet moments, when the candle flickered low, she whispered prayers, not from fear, but from hope. She prayed that God might see her heart, even when no one else did. And still, despite everything, she dreamed. She dreamed of walking in a meadow without a veil. She dreamed of laughter without fear. She dreamed of a husband who might be kind, though she knew kindness was rare in marriage. These dreams were small, fragile things. She never spoke them aloud, for to speak them was to break them. But inside her heart, they glowed like tiny flames, keeping her spirit alive in a world that tried so hard to extinguish it. At last, the day arrived when whispers became certainty. A messenger from a distant land arrived, his cloak heavy with dust, his horse foaming from the long ride. He carried a letter, sealed with red wax and stamped with a foreign crest. The king broke it open at the great table, his lords leaning close, their eyes bright with curiosity. The decision was made. The princess would marry a prince from beyond the mountains, a man she had never met, whose voice she had never heard, whose face she could only imagine. She bowed her head as the news was spoken. Outwardly, she showed no reaction, but inside, her heart trembled. Her childhood home, her mother's presence, her familiar walls of stone, all of it would be left behind. She would travel to a foreign land, to a foreign court, where every eye would judge her as both stranger and prize. There was no room for tears, only duty. The farewell was not tender. The king gave her blessings in the form of commands. Bring honor to our name. Secure the alliance. Obey your husband. Her mother kissed her cheek, tears hidden behind her veil. Her sisters wept quietly, for they knew their turns would come. And then the princess rode out, her carriage heavy with trunks of gowns, her escort armed with swords. As the castle walls faded into the distance, she held her hands tight in her lap, whispering prayers beneath her breath. The road was long, the nights spent in unfamiliar keeps. Villagers watched her pass, bowing low, murmuring blessings. But she did not belong to them, not yet, not fully. She was between worlds, neither daughter nor wife. When she arrived at her husband's court, she was received with ceremony. Trumpets sounded, banners waved, and nobles lined the great hall to witness her entry. But behind the smiles, suspicion lingered. She was foreign. Her accent marked her as outsider. Her manners, her clothes, even the way she prayed, were compared to theirs. Her new husband, the prince, bowed politely, offered her his hand, and said little more. Their wedding was held swiftly, a mass thick with incense, the vows spoken before God, the feast lasting long into the night. And just like that, her life was no longer her own. Her husband was not cruel, but he was distant. He had been raised for war, for politics, for ruling, not for tenderness. He treated her with formality, as though she were another alliance, sealed, another task completed. They spoke politely at table, but rarely in private. He did not ask her what she loved, what she feared, what she dreamed of. Such questions were not a husband's duty. In the evenings, when they were together in their chamber, silence often hung heavier than words. Their closeness was physical, demanded by duty, not by affection. She longed for warmth, for laughter, for even one glance that said, "I see you," not just a crown upon your head. But such glances were rare, and she learned not to expect them. From the moment of her wedding, the whispers began again. Courtiers leaned close to one another. Will she give us an heir? How soon will we see a son? Her body became the kingdom's concern. Every missed monthly cycle was noted, every sign of sickness examined. The pressure grew heavy upon her, for her worth was now measured in children. When the midwives came, their words were clear. You must be strong, Your Grace. The kingdom depends on you. But strength did not erase fear. She knew well the stories of women who never rose from the birthing bed, of infants who never drew breath, of queens who wept as cradle after cradle stood empty. When her time came, she entered the chamber, trembling. The bed was draped in white sheets. Herbs burned to cleanse the air. Women gathered around her, murmuring prayers. There was no pain relief, no knowledge of infection, no doctor with healing hands. Only hot cloths, whispered encouragements, and the force of nature itself. The pain was beyond words, waves of agony that made her cry out until her throat was raw. Hours stretched into eternity. Her ladies wiped sweat from her brow, held her arms, whispered that God was with her. And at last, when the child was placed in her arms, a son, healthy and crying relief, swept the room. The court rejoiced, bells rang in the town, and her husband bowed with pride. But for the princess, the relief was mingled with terror, for she knew this was only the beginning. She would be called upon again and again until her body could give no more. Yet within this suffering, she discovered a hidden strength. Every time she endured childbirth, every time she stood before the court with her child in her arms, she realized she had survived what many could not. She was fragile in appearance, delicate in her silks and jewels, yet her endurance was greater than steel. The men of the court fought their battles with swords and shields, but she fought hers in silence, in chambers filled with shadows and whispers, where life and death balanced upon her body. This strength, though rarely praised, was real. It was the strength that carried kingdoms. But strength did not erase loneliness. Her husband remained distant, her ladies remained rivals, and her new court remained suspicious. She was queen, yet not free, surrounded by wealth, yet starved of true companionship. At night, she prayed alone. In the mornings, she wore her smile like armor. And when her children cried in their cradles, she soothed them with songs her mother once sang, the only inheritance of love she had been able to carry with her. every gesture was noted. If she favored one servant, rumors spread of favoritism. If she dressed too richly, whispers accused her of pride. If she dressed too simply, others murmured of disrespect. When she spoke too little, she was called cold. When she spoke too much, she was called foolish. There was no middle ground. Her life was a performance without pause, every movement a scene in the endless theater of the court. And still, she endured. This was her world, a place where freedom was rare, where love was uncertain, where duty weighed heavier than joy. Yet in the quiet, she carried her strength. She endured the cold, the scrutiny, the pain of childbirth. She carried her lineage, her husband's legacy, her children's futures, and though her name may be forgotten in the scrolls of history, her silent resilience shaped the course of kingdoms. She was not a fairy tale princess waiting for rescue. She was a survivor, strong, not in choice, but in endurance. Seasons turned, and the years carried her forward. The young girl who once trembled in her father's cold castle became a woman who carried children, who stood beside her husband in courts, who wore her crown with quiet grace. Her face changed softer at first, then lined with years of worry and wisdom. Her hair, once hidden beneath a veil, turned silver beneath jeweled crowns. She had walked through storms and shadows, through nights of fear and mornings of duty, and still, she remained. The world around her shifted, kings rose and fell, wars were fought and forgotten, alliances formed and broke apart. But her role stayed the same, constant, enduring, steady like the candle that burns even when no one notices its light. What does she leave the world? Not just children, though they were her legacy, her living proof of survival. Not just alliances, though those shaped the fate of kingdoms. She left behind an example of resilience, a story not of glory on the battlefield, but of strength in silence. The strength to wake each morning when the world gave her no choice. The strength to endure pain for the sake of others. The strength to live without freedom, yet still find meaning. History rarely writes the names of princesses with honor. Their lives are recorded only in marriages and births. But behind those lines in the chronicles, there was a heart, a woman who laughed quietly when no one saw, who whispered prayers in the night, who carried dreams that never had the chance to fly. And so, we reach the end of our tale. Not a tale of fairy tales, nor of shining magic, but one of humanity. Perhaps you see now that every stone castle had its shadows, every crown its weight. Yet also, within those walls lived souls who endured with patience, who carried kindness in small, hidden ways, and who gave strength even when the world did not thank them. The medieval princess, cold in her chambers, lonely in her heart, bound by duty, still teaches us something. That strength does not always roar. Sometimes, strength is the whisper that says, "I will endure."